Good morning, everybody. Judy Maggio here with KLRU, and I'm joined by some great journalists in town who've covered City Hall and have been involved at City Hall for a long time. And we want to tell you about a new journalism initiative. So first of all, let me introduce everybody. We have Dan Zare with the Austin American Statesman. Welcome. Do you have your coffee? Where's your coffee?
No, it's behind me.
Okay.
It's within reach.
Okay, good, because it's still morning time. Matt Largy with KUT. And Ashley Fisher with the Austin Monitor. So we've decided that we're joining forces, but this didn't just come about overnight. First of all, I want to tell everybody why we're here why we're just not sitting at some random benches in the middle of Austin. We're at the Triangle, and the reason I wanted to do it here was because back in the late 90s, when this part of town was going to be developed and they proposed building a big shopping center here, the neighborhoods were up in arms. And there were huge pushbacks and protests, and then they decided that they could reach some common ground. So I thought it'd be a good backdrop because we're talking about reaching common ground between developers and neighbors and how that is all going to be fitting into something called CodeNEXT. So first of all, I want to, after now we know why we're here, let's talk about this initiative, why it's important to folks.
Well, obviously the land use regulations are going to have a major impact on the shape of Austin for years to come, guiding development throughout the city and then rippling out, throughout the region as well. And it's complicated. It's a dull, long, complicated, tough.
Yeah, people kind of groan when you say CodeNEXT. They go, oh, what is it, 1,100 pages or something? I mean, it's
1,130 pages of technical detail. It's not fun reading, but it's important. And trying to cut through that clutter and help clarify the process, help clarify the code itself is also an important task. And that, I think, is what we're hoping to do with this CodeNEXT Hub.
But why join forces? Why do you guys think it's important that we have these entities that do a lot of coverage on City Hall and city issues? How can we benefit each other, and how is that going to benefit folks watching?
Well, I mean, like
Dan
said, it's extremely complicated. Most of us don't fully understand it, and we're learning a lot about this as we go along here. And I don't think any single one of us can do it alone. There's so much to it. We really have to work together and kind of separate it out into bite-sized pieces. And the more bite-sized pieces that we can separate out and that we can each individually tackle, it feels like the easier it'll be to understand and the more headway we can make in actually helping our audiences understand what this is all about.
And Ashley, you come to this from two different perspectives because you worked at City Hall for a long time. So I'm assuming that the council is also taking this in bite-sized pieces. How can you comprehend something that large in one setting?
Right, yes, it's going to be a very long process, and I think that's one of the reasons all of our info together on one side is helpful, because this is not going to be passed in a quick fashion. There's lots of meetings, lots of council meetings, lots of commission meetings, lots of public meetings, and there might be people that are tuning into the process at a particular point in time, and so having all the articles in one place allows them to sort of tune in at that point in time and sort of get up to speed as to what's happened and keep up with it, because it's long, complicated, and not going to be finished anytime soon.
So let's talk about how people can access this. First of all, if you're just tuning in, we have Ashley Fisher with the Austin Monitor, Matt Largy with KUT, Dan Zare with the Statesman, Judy Maggio from KLRU. And the reason we're all here is because our news organizations are joining forces to cover CodeNEXT and give you access to the many different aspects and iterations of this thing. I mean, it's changing all the time, and right now it's time for folks to weigh in on it. So how can people access this information?
So our site is at CodeNEXTHub.org. It's a nice little site, thanks to the hard work of some of our web team, Stephanie Federico, Andrew Weber. Just want to give a shout out to those guys. They put a lot of work into this. And so you can go there, and there's the history of CodeNEXT, there's the maps from CodeNEXT, there's a lot of background information there. If you're just trying to start understanding it, it's a good place to begin, because there's not a lot of resources out there at the moment that are really, basic, that give you the basic background. I mean, that's what if people don't understand the very basics of this, it's going to be hard for them to connect and understand the larger and more complicated aspects of this. So we really wanted to build a place where people could come to learn about the very basics of this and then delve deeper if they wanted to.
And it's hard to weigh in on something if you don't understand the basics. So that's kind of what we're providing for people. And I'm assuming I haven't spent much time on the website, but from all looks of it, it's easy to navigate and easy to understand. And as someone who's not the most technically savvy person on the planet Earth, I appreciate that.
Well, we certainly tried to make it easy to navigate and understand, with the idea of kind of a one-stop shop that people can go to get up to speed. It starts with the aggregation of the news stories from a variety of outlets. So the Monitor, KUT, KLRU, the Statesman, and the Austin Business Journal has joined as well. So we have some excellent news content there. And then on top of that, we wrap around other resources, links, like Matt mentioned, the history, and just trying to build out context around that to make it a little easier to understand. We'll be updating it as we go along. We need to add a glossary, I think, among anything. So we're joking about all the acronyms and strange terms that you're going to run into. I think that might be the next phrase.
What are those?
Transect zones for 1,000, Alex. So we'll add more as we go along, and continue to update. And of course, as we get feedback, we'll be able to provide more information with the ultimate goal of helping people better engage with this process. I mean, ultimately, it's going to change
The face of Austin.
Yeah, it's going to change your neighborhood. It's going to change the buildings, the businesses around you. It's going to change how you get to and from work. It's about as wide an influence as a city policy can have, so it's important to be involved.
One thing I've noticed from the initial outlay of this information, and they're going to be weighing everything and getting feedback through next spring, nobody seems to like it so far. And that's a bit troubling. I mean, they spent so much time developing this Imagine Austin plan and then translating it into this new development code. And so far, it doesn't seem to be getting much positive feedback.
Oh, I mean, go back to our current location. I mean, if there's anything people like to fight about, it's zoning codes, even though they don't care to, no one wants to sit back and read it, and it's dull, it's dry.
It's easier to just go down to City Hall
Sure.
and say, I want my neighborhood to stay the same.
Absolutely. And when it comes to, making those actual decisions, the actual buildings on the ground, we go up in arms, and for good reason. This is our environment, our
That's
space.
Right. We care. The people in Austin, one of the things I love about this community is we do care deeply about each other, about keeping Austin weird, keeping Austin the unique, progressive community that it is, and at the same time, understanding that we're growing fast. And we have to be able to wrap our arms around that and do it in positive ways. And this is just an outline to try to make that happen. But everybody, I think, agreed that the development code needed fixing. I mean, the quagmire that was going on in zoning and development at City Hall when you needed to just remodel your kitchen, it took forever to get approval. So I guess we have to look at the positives and be cautiously optimistic as journalists.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, nobody liked the current code, I guess. Developers didn't like it, homeowners didn't like it, virtually nobody liked it. And so everybody could agree most people could agree that something needed to change, but, I think it's pretty predictable that no one was going to like the first draft of what came out. I mean,
Sure.
It's just so complicated and it just affects so many different things that I think there was no way that they could get it right necessarily on the first try, especially with, they did do they had some public input, but now the kind of real public input starts, and once people start to understand it, they can start to shape what the next drafts of it look like. And some council members are talking about even delaying this process, which feels like it's already gone on for ever. But, some council members are saying that, constituents don't understand this yet. Yeah. And
well,
that
I'm not
we need
sure
more
everybody
time.
on the council has their arms wrapped around
Absolutely.
it.
Absolutely.
So,
And when people are looking at something like this, there's so many different aspects for them to sort of pay attention to. Everybody's going to hone in sort of on how it affects their home, their property, their neighborhood. And that's certainly important in one of the aspects. But then there's a lot of broad questions at play as to like, what kind of city do we want to be? How do we want to move around the city? What do we want to do about affordability and diversity and density and all sorts of things? So you have these sort of very fine-tuned, honed-in interests about your own property, as well as these broad city things, sometimes which don't align with each other, so it makes it really complicated and messy sometimes.
I think so too, and I think the great thing is that we can probably expand this to cover other big city issues than just CodeNEXT. I mean, I think that's one of the goals, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's so many just like really huge city issues that are really hard to wrap your arms around, especially for a single organization.
Traffic,
I mean, we've got we've got two reporters, Audrey McGlinchey and Saida Hassan, both working on CodeNEXT, but there's no way that even two reporters can tackle this entire thing, and that's like a quarter of our reporting staff that's on this story.
You brought up the best point is that all media organizations are having to do more with less. So
exactly.
Why not join forces and play to our strengths?
That's right.
We can do video. You guys can do more of the in-depth reporting and writing. You guys can do more of the radio style. You are narrow focused on City Hall and what's going on in city government. So, and we cover more broad issues. So I think it's a great team. And of course the Austin Business Journal is coming on board as well.
Well, I think provided some mapping that might be helpful for everybody to take a look at.
Yeah.
But yeah, we all have different strengths, and the Austin Monitor often covers like the boards and commission meetings and some very kind of hyper-local stuff. So combining that with all the other coverage, you can get it all in one place.
How has the reception been so far at some of these meetings where they're going out into the public and bringing the CodeNEXT information? I haven't been to any of these yet. I don't know if you guys have, but I'm wondering, so far it hasn't gotten just rave reviews in the various neighborhoods?
Yeah, I mean, our reporters have been to, I haven't personally been to one. I'm sorry to admit.
That'll be the next Facebook Live.
I don't think there's been one in the district that I live yet. So
I think there's one in District 10 where I live coming up.
But both Saida and Audrey have been to several of these input meetings, and yeah, like you said, I think generally people are have some criticisms of the first draft.
Change is hard.
It is.
And especially in a city for longtime Austinites, we've seen so much change. We're here at the Triangle because when they proposed building this in the late 90s, people just raised a ruckus. They said, "How we can't have a shopping center in the middle of central Austin? This is blasphemy." And there were a lot of compromises made, but it worked out. And I think it's one of those places that people really enjoy coming. And there's parks for the kids, and there's different types of shops, and there's no big box imposing place here.
And they're still building it.
And they're still building it. We can hear the construction in the background 20 years later.
Must be a good thing. It's interesting too, seeing developments like this that you hardly even pay any thought to now. Most people know the Triangle and don't think twice about it. And I think that tends to be the case for a variety of things. There'll be a great bit of controversy over the initial planning for something, a debate about how it should be
The Walmart in Northwest Austin, North Cross
another
Mall,
great example. And then it settles in, life goes on, the community builds around it, and you adjust. I think what's important to note is sort of the underlying code that governs that then. So for things like the Triangle to settle and be an accepted sort of development in the community, a common place where people go and meet, the underlying code has to be sound. It has to be in keeping with the community's ideals, in keeping with what we want our city to be. So I think that again sort of underscores getting this right, or at least as close to right as you can get something like this. And then hopefully, you're going to have individual debates over developments after that, but you're not going to get something so beyond the lines that it's unacceptable for years to come.
But we have to come to terms with the fact that Austin is growing so rapidly and things do have to change. And this is basically a way to navigate it and bring in people's input and ideas so that people feel like they're part of the solution and not just, complaining.
That's right. I think there are two. I think there's like two things at work here. There's sort of the big picture, and then there's the really micro level. Like, people are very concerned about what's going to happen to their neighborhood, and that's totally understandable. And people should fight for the kind of neighborhood that they want. But then there's also the larger picture. I think if you look at, I can't remember when exactly it was, but the last, not Imagine Austin, but the comprehensive plan that happened before that, there are a lot of criticisms of that, because it led to the kind of Austin that we have today, which is somewhat sprawling, which is not very dense, which, there's an argument to be made that it doesn't use the land that we have in the best way possible, especially with a booming population. So it's really important, like one of you said, it's really important to get this right, because 20 years from now, 30 years from now, we're going to look at this and say, either what did we do, or, we really, this really led to something good.
And I'm wondering how gentrification plays into all this. I know that's been one of the big complaints and concerns, is East Austin and how we're going to develop there. We just did a story recently on a gentleman who's had the house has been in his family since 1902. And he's a veteran, and he can't afford his taxes. I mean, this is a story all over the city. Longtime Austinites can no longer afford to keep their homes. And I'm not sure that CodeNEXT will be the solution to that. But affordability and density and all those issues do come into play when you're talking about land development.
Yeah, and I think there's still a lot of questions about how this new code or this new draft would have an effect on all of those issues. But I think what we do know is that the current code and the current situation is causing or is contributing to some of those issues. Like, we're seeing a lot of redevelopment and displacement and houses not being affordable. And so we know what we're doing now doesn't work, but there still has to be a lot of discussion about exactly what those solutions look like, because they're not easy issues to solve. And I don't know that there's a lot of cities to look to that have solved that issue too. Everybody's sort of trying to figure this out.
So CodeNEXTHub.org. That's where you need to go if you want to find out more about Austin's new development code that's really in the works. And the folks at City Hall want you guys to weigh in. They want you to talk about your neighborhood concerns. They want you to talk about why you think development in your area needs to be a certain way. So that's why we've, joined forces, combined our resources as journalists to try to keep everybody abreast of what's going on. So let's all before we say goodbye, let's all give our best cheerleading pep talk about why people should click on CodeNEXTHub.org.
Besides the brilliant design of the site, KUT folks, here. I'd say two reasons. Number one, it's a good centralized location to go to get the information that you need to start to understand this, and we'll be updating it throughout the process, and you can keep tabs there and follow on. I think I'd sort of compare this in a sense to an election. You can have a voice and help define sort of the future development. And frankly, this is going to affect so many things, from affordability, transportation, sprawl, your commute, your neighbors. Weigh in. And if you don't, I will find it hard to listen to your complaints later,
Exactly.
I suppose.
I think that's a great analogy. The whole, if you don't vote, don't complain. This is very analogous to that.
Yeah, and now is really the time to get involved. Get involved early in the process, because the further along this process goes, the more set a lot of these things are going to be, and the harder it's going to be to change it later on down the road. So, get involved now. Don't complain later.
Yeah, this process is going to affect the kind of city we want to be, and don't feel like you have to be an expert in planning or have a lot of experience advocating at City Hall to be able to engage on this.
Yeah.
You don't have to have a lot of background. It's still going to affect your day-to-day life in the future, so we need everybody to engage, not just sort of the regulars. We need everybody a part of the solution.
And I think that's important, not just the people that always weigh in. We want everybody to weigh in on this.
Yeah, and I think we recognize, you have to recognize that it is hard for some people to get involved in the process. They just don't have
It's
have
time.
times. They
Yeah,
have
it's hard.
kids,
You can get down to
and
City Hall.
you know. So if this is an easy way for you to start to understand the process, and maybe we should think about. And I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. Hopefully, I'm not committing us to anything. But maybe we should think about adding some resources to the page to help people get involved, like sort of easy ways to get involved. Here's who to email. Who's here? Here's who you can call.
No, I think that's very important.
And so, you know, to make it easier than going to a meeting that's maybe at City Hall or maybe at a, you know, in your district, but, you know, you've got kids, you've got work, it's hard to do this.
Like a Civics 101 on how to make your voice heard on the development code and why it's important to you and your lifestyle and your family.
We do have a link at CodeNEXTHub.org to the city's page where you can comment on the draft and that sort of thing as well. You can just search CodeNEXT in Austin for the city's page. CodeNEXT.org, excuse me, has links to some of those things as well. But let us know too. We've got an email address up there. Let us know what would help, and we'll be happy to do what we can to build it out.
Well, we consider CodeNEXTHub.org a public service, and as journalists, we feel like it's important for us to inform the public of what's going on in your community, and this is one of the most important issues in our community that's going to affect us for the next, well, many, many decades to come. So don't, when you hear the word CodeNEXT, don't go, oh, I don't care about that. Make it a point to go to CodeNEXTHub.org, learn about it, find out how it could impact your life, and then weigh in. We live in a democracy. We live in a city where people care about their community and their environment. So weigh in, make your voice heard. That's why we're here. And we hope this has been beneficial. We hope that you continue to follow us on our various websites and our various Facebook pages. And more importantly, we hope that you take advantage of CodeNEXTHub.org. Make it a great day, everybody. Thanks for joining us today.